In this video, we will cover generating cross-tabulations of two categorical variables in SPSS. We'll also look at how to generate clustered bar charts for two categorical variables in SPSS, which is a graphic representation of the data we see in the cross-tabulation. Finally, we'll look at how to generate stacked bar charts for two categorical variables in SPSS, which is a slightly different implementation of the visualization of the clustered bar chart for two categorical variables. To follow along in this demo, you will need the following: access to SPSS software, the SAT 2016 PA data file in SPSS.sav format. We'll begin by opening our SAT 2016 PA.sav file in SPSS. Our data file in the data viewer has a bunch of variables. Like in our previous video, we're going to focus on our categorical variables. Our categorical variables are region, which is a 1 to 8 indicator of which region the school is located within. We'll also look at SAT, which is a dichotomous indicator noting whether or not the school administered the SAT. 1 if the school administered the SAT, and 0 otherwise. Our third and final categorical variable is charter, 0 denoting that the school is not a charter school, and 1 denoting that the school is a charter school. To generate a cross-tabulation, we're going to go under Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, CrossTabs. In general, when you're setting up a crosstab, you may have an idea of which variable is your independent variable and which variable is your dependent variable. Perhaps I might suspect that some regions of the state have more charter schools than others. If I believe region is my independent variable and that influences the number of charter schools, I'm going to place region on the columns. Since I think that charter schools, or the number of charter schools, is affected by the region, I'm going to place the charter variable on the rows. If I click OK, SPSS will produce in the output window my cross-tabulation. Here, our cross-tabulation shows us the counts for each of our categories. So unlike our frequency distribution table, which provided us counts for only a single variable, this produces counts for how many schools are located in the Great Lakes and Erie that are not a charter school or a charter school, how many school districts or schools are listed in the Pennsylvania Wilds that are not a charter school and are a charter school, how many are in the Susquehanna Valley that are not a charter school, and how many are a charter school, and so on. You can see here that we still have the same number of observations, which is 1590. There are 2 schools that are missing a region variable, so they are excluded from the analysis. You can also get percentages in your cell entries by clicking a different option box in the crosstab menu. To do that, let's go back to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and Crosstabs. Once again, I've got region set to my column variable and charter set to my rows. If I want to see the percentage of cases in each cell entry, I can click the Cells option box and add percentages for either the rows, columns, or total, depending on the information you want displayed. For illustration, I'm going to click here Row. This provides a slightly different information. So here, because I've asked for the rows, it's going to tell us the percentage of observations in each cell for each of our rows. In other words, we're asking here under the first percent with charter, what is the percentage of schools that do not have charter schools that appear in each region? So here we can see that 5.9% of non-charter schools appear in the Great Lakes and Erie, 6.3% of non-charter schools appear in the Pennsylvania Wilds, 2.8% of non-charter schools appear in the Susquehanna Valley, and so on and so forth. Likewise, where it says percent within charter, we could see that 2.9% of charter schools appear in the Great Lakes and Erie, 1.4% of charter schools appear in the Pennsylvania Wilds, 0.7% of charter schools appear in the Susquehanna Valley, and so on and so forth. Finally, under the total, you'll see here that there's a total percent of schools that appear in each region. So 5.7% of schools appear in the Great Lakes and Erie, 5.9% appear in the Pennsylvania Wilds, 2.6% of all schools appear in the Susquehanna Valley, and so on. You can call for different options if you want to do the percentages by column by selecting the columns option in that menu. In order to get a visualization of a clustered bar chart, there are two different options. One option is to go through the CrossTab menu and under the main tab window, select Display Clustered Bar Charts. This option will reproduce your cross tabulation, but will also give you the clustered bar chart. Here we can see the frequencies of non-charter schools and the frequency of charter schools broken down by region. You can also create a clustered bar chart by going to the Graphs menu and clicking Chart Builder. This gives you a little bit more control over how your bar chart will look. Here I'm going to select a bar, and I'm going to drag the clustered bar chart up to the window. Depending on how you want your graph to look, you can drag one of the variables to the x-axis and one of the variables to the cluster. By default, and when we use the clustered bar chart option under the CrossTabs, it used charter as the x-axis and region as the cluster. So we can reproduce that graph by dragging charter to the x-axis and region to the cluster. And here we have the same graphic. You can also reverse that. So perhaps instead of having region in the cluster and charter on the x-axis, you want to reverse it. Well, here I can drag charter to the cluster, and I can drag region to the x-axis. This produces the same information that we see in the previous graph, but it's displayed differently. Now you can see here we have the regions along the x-axis, and then the bars represent the number of charter schools and non-charter schools in each region. Your choice over which graph is better will depend on how you want to communicate information to your audience. In this instance, I think that using charter on the x-axis and region in the clusters is more visually appealing and conveys more information. But once again, that's a stylistic choice that will be made by the presenter. Finally, we can create what is called a stacked bar chart, which represents the information from the clustered bar chart slightly differently. Instead of placing the bars next to each other, it's going to literally stack the bars on top of each other. To create the stacked bar chart, we're going to go back to our graph chart builder. And here, instead of selecting clustered bar chart, I'm going to drag stacked bar chart to the top. The same rules apply as defining one variable for the x-axis and one variable for the cluster or the color. So here, I'm going to leave region and charter. Click OK. And now we can see once again that our region is on the x-axis and our clusters or our bars represent the number of charter schools and the number of non-charter schools. You can, of course, define it the other way by flipping which variables in the stack and which variables in the x-axis. So here I'm going to put region in the cluster, and I'm going to put charter in the x-axis. Once again, the information presented in the clustered bar chart and stacked bar chart is identical. It'll be your job as the researcher and presenter to determine which figure looks best for the information you're trying to convey to your audience. This concludes our short video on crosstabs, clustered bar charts, and stacked bar charts.